right, welcome back to another edition of the Irish Breakdown podcast. My name is Brian Driscoll. I'm the publisher at irishbreakdown.com. Today's going to be a solo day. Vince is in school today, so it's just going to be me today. And we're going to talk recruiting. We're going to talk Notre Dame recruiting, and we're going to talk specifically about the Notre Dame commits. We've talked a lot lately about uncommitted prospects and where things stand with Notre Dame, but we're going to talk about Notre Dame's commits. And the reason is because it works out well, because today I released my big board, my commit big board for the offense and defensive classes. Just something that today, I've gone back and forth on this just because when you rank prospects and, as far as just giving analysis, when you actually rank them 1 to 5, there can be some hurt feelings and things like that. But the reality is it's y'all, people seem to like it. And so we did it today. So what I did was I updated my grades of all the Notre Dame commits, went and watched film again of their junior seasons of players that played, their junior seasons in the spring, updated grades. So you're going to see big jump from like Jaden Mickey, a big jump from Aiden Gabera, and ranked them, on my grading scale, which essentially comes from, I have 8 different categories per prospect, per position, I should say. So a quarterback is being graded on the 8 categories that I view as most important for a quarterback, and then a running back, 8 most important categories for a running back, and they're all built around some sort of like size, frame, strength concept. And there's some athletic grades, then there's technical grades, and then there's sort of intangible grades, things that go beyond just the measurable size, weight, things like that. It could be things like a player's instincts, player's playmaking ability, health history, things like that. So, and then you add up those 8 categories, and that's how you get your grade. So today we're going to talk about the Notre Dame offensive class, and it's an interesting group, and we're going to talk about where the class stands right now, what needs that. We're going to go through my ranking of 5 of the 5 commits in the class, and then we'll talk a little bit about what the needs are for the class and sort of what's next in that group. So to begin, I want to kind of show something with y'all as far as where you can find these articles. So obviously today it's easy. They're on the front page of irishbreakdown.com. If you're watching the podcast on YouTube, you can see irishbreakdown.com scrolling down at the bottom. But I'm going to show you. So we created at Irish Breakdown a tab that shows, so this is our front page of our website. So obviously you can see those 2 stories there. Have a film analysis and just a bio, like some information, recruiting information on Xavier Bradshaw. So if you go to the page, and it'll look like this on your phone and any platforms too, just go up to the top here by the Fan Nation. You click on this. See these drop downs, just go down to ND recruiting. And this takes you to all our important links, all of our important recruiting links. So you'll see the offer lists right there for 22 and 23, the visit schedule. These are the current group of commits. And if each player has a profile that I have done, has a film analysis and those things on it. And then down here you have the whole commits big board. That's just film analysis of the 11 commits by position. And then here you go here's my big boards. I'll have my outside receivers big board coming out this week. Here is the offensive and defensive commits big boards, which I did today. So we're going to go through this and just really go through the 5 prospects and how I see it and just how I view this class. So to begin, when you look at the last couple of years, 2020 and 2021, it was a situation where the offenses really, to me, the offenses carried Notre Dame's recruiting. So if you look at, for example, this past year, Notre Dame finished with a top 10 recruiting class. Now, you could argue that the 2 highest ranked recruits from the class, and this was certainly the case with SI All-American, the 2 highest ranked commits in the class were defensive players, Gabriel Rubio and Prince Colley. But if you look at the class as a whole, and if they weren't the highest ranked on my board, Blake Fisher was the highest ranked on my board. But if you look at the class as a whole, it was really carried by the offensive class. One of the best quarterbacks in the country, strong running back group, very good receiver class, one of the 5 to 10 best receiver classes in the country, strong tight end class, and then, of course, a very high quality, top 5 to 10 class on the offensive line. And so they've obviously been carried by the offense. And it was the same thing was true in 2020 when you looked at a class that Drew Pine, who was a top 150 recruit. You had Chris Tyree, who was a top 100 player. Strong receiver class with Jordan Johnson, who was a composite 5-star. And you also had Xavier Watts, Michael Mayer, which was a composite 5-star. And then you only had 2 offensive linemen, but they were both very highly ranked. And Tosh Baker, who was a top 100 recruit, and Michael Carmody. The defensive class has been a little bit behind where the offensive class has been, if we're being honest. And there's some good players in those groups, but 2020, for example, Notre Dame completely struck out at linebacker and safety. The cornerback class took a big hit when it lost Landon Bartleson. And then you look at the 2021 class, and it was a good balanced class at most positions, but they came up short, in my opinion, at linebacker. They had one linebacker that was really a top guy, another player that's a bit of a project, and a guy that just, for me, didn't grade out to the level that you'd expect Notre Dame linebackers to grade out, and that was Kahano Kia. So really, this is a big year where now the defensive class is strong, but the offensive class has to continue going with strong classes, and that's really where they're at. And I would say that the foundation is good for the 2022 class. Very good start on the offensive line. Joey Tanona, Tai Chan, we'll dive into those players individually. Very strong class. Very strong start to the running back class. If Notre Dame's going to get 2 running backs, then in Jadarian Price is short of your floor in that's an excellent running back class. If Notre Dame ends up not getting another running back in this class, that to me is still a good class running back. You got a top 200 caliber player running back in Jadarian Price after getting 2 really good running backs last year and then Chris Tyree the year before. You've really gone a long way towards restocking your depth chart. And then if you can land one more prospect, then you're in great position, and we'll get into that after we get into the individual players. You've got a quarterback that, I don't rank as high as other people, but ESPN ranks him as a top 150 recruit. Rivals ranks him as a 4-star. Good, solid prospect. I think we can all agree on that. He's a good, solid prospect. I think where there's some disagreement is maybe on what his ceiling is at this point in time. But he's a highly regarded kid. He's recruiting really well, and he comes from one of the better programs on the East Coast, and sometimes one of the better programs in the country, depending on, the kind of year they're having, and that's Bergen Catholic. And then, there's a Maureen Walker, who is right now, we'll kind of start going through the list, is my 5th ranked of 5 prospects, of 5 commits in the 22 class. Walker's an intriguing player, and probably the guy in this class that gets the biggest debate. There are some people that see him as being a really fast guy. I don't. There are some people that see him as having a very high ceiling. I can see that. There's a debate on whether or not they should have taken him at this early point in the stage when there's other players like Nicholas Anderson still on the board. But as you can see right here on this, you see his recruiting rankings. This is updated as of last night. He's a consensus 3-star recruit. ESPN ranks him as the number 79 receiver in the country, 247 Sports as the number 99 receiver in the country, and he's composite number 786 in the country. So there's some big discussion and debate here about a Maureen Walker. But let's look at some of the positives of Maureen Walker and why I gave him a 4-star upside grade, because I do think there's some tools to work with here. Number one, very good length. Now, he's not the biggest receiver, so I didn't say great size, because he's pretty skinny at 170 pounds, and he's going to have to fill out that frame, but I love his length. He's listed at 6'3". He's got a really nice wingspan. And I really like how he uses that length. Like, look, you can be a tall receiver with very long arms and not know how to use it. Maureen knows how to use it. He's got fast hands, attacks the ball really well, confident pass catcher, and he's very good in the back shoulders. Now, moving forward in college, he's going to have to get a lot stronger because the bigger corners are going to be able to kind of muscle him right now. And that is one of the things that, to me, tamps down his grade and why I don't think he really shines in the 7-on-7 circuit like other prospects. And I've talked to people that have seen him in person. 2 different people I've talked to said he's probably the 4th or 5th best receiver on his 7-on-7 team. And then another person said he's the 3rd best receiver on the 7-on-7 team. So when it comes to Maureen Walker, what you're looking at is just the ceiling. The floor is low. There's a lot of room where he needs to continue improving. There's a lot of parts of his game that have to get better. But the one thing you can say is he has a higher ceiling. I don't say very high ceiling, but he has a higher ceiling than maybe you might expect from a guy that ranks that low because of that length. And there does seem to be some untapped potential. I don't see great speed on film. I don't see it in 7-on-7. I see him as a really good high school player that has some questionable projection to the next level. Having said that, he has some reported, and I still haven't found it officially, but I've seen it reported that he has run like a 10.5 or a 10.7 in the 100-meter dash. That is outstanding time. But that's a track time. That's not a football time. The football speed is something I don't see yet. But when you look at a guy that's as long as he is, a guy that has the kind of lanky frame that he has, what you'll see from time to time with prospects like that is when they get to college and they stop growing, and then they start growing height and lengthwise, and they start filling out, you see a burst in explosiveness. You will see that from time to time. And I think he has one of those frames to me that says, okay, there's some projectability there. There's a chance that he could see a big jump in explosiveness when he gets to the next level. And if that happens, then now all of a sudden he starts tapping into that upside, and now all of a sudden he's a guy that could maybe be a stretch the field kind of guy. You know, maybe he can bring you some of the things that maybe Chris Brown brought you back in 2015, where he's not ever going to be to me, in my opinion, he's never going to be a number one recruit or number one receiver. He's never going to be your go-to guy. But as far as a complementary player to other top prospects, he can be that. So there are some tools to work with, and that's why he ranks as a 4-star upside player, and he is the 5th player on my board. Number 4 is quarterback Steve Angeli. This is another hotly debated prospect for me. Now, I like some things about Steve Angeli. There's certainly some aspects of his game that you have to like. I think he's got a very nice NFL type of body, you know, that old school NFL type of body, 6'2", 6'3", 210 plus pounds, you know, thick lower half. He's going to continue filling out. He's going to be 220 plus at that 6'2", 6'3" range. He's got a good arm. It's not a great arm, but there's room for improvement there. And I'm curious to see how he does as a senior when it comes to a jump in just being able to throw with power. Now, I've seen Steve Angeli make some impressive throws on film and in 7-on-7s. The issue for me, however, is that when you watch him make a throw, so I've seen him make really impressive corner routes, throws in camp settings and one-on-one settings. The problem, however, is that he had to muscle up to get those balls downfield. Well, that's difficult to do with any consistency in college. You can't be able to muscle up that way. You have to be able to have enough arm power to where you can throw off platform. And usually guys that have to muscle up throws aren't great off-platform throwers. That is a concern for me for Steve Angeli. Now, can he improve there? Absolutely. I've had people tell me that they've seen him this spring, and he has improved there. I have to see it. I haven't seen it yet. That's what people tell me. So we're going to have to see that. I saw a couple throws from his Elite 11 performance this weekend, and I didn't see a whole lot of difference in that. Now, the ball was jumping out a little bit better on some short throws, but I don't see it still on the deeper throws. So there's got to be some projectability there. Now, he's not a great athlete, but I like how he moves in the pocket. He's not a guy that's going to step up and run for 500-600 yards like Ian Book did or like Brandon Wimbush did. But he is a guy that, to me, he's a lot like Jack Cohn in that regards. I think Jack Cohn's a better overall athlete, but I think Steve Angeli shows me good foot quickness in the pocket. He shows me good pocket presence. He can move around. He can manipulate. He keeps his eyes downfield really well, and he throws the ball well on the run. Those are all important traits for a guy that maybe isn't an elite athlete, a top-level athlete like we've seen Notre Dame have a lot of in recent years. I mean, if you think about Notre Dame's last, 5 starting quarterbacks, be Ian Book, Brandon Wimbush, Deshaun Kaiser, Malik Zaire, and Everett Golson. Last 5 starting quarterbacks have been very athletic players, all had the ability to hurt you with their legs. That's not really what Steve Angeli is. He may be able to, on a 3rd and 4, if you bail, he can step up and move the chains, but he's just not going to be making a lot of damage with his legs. But as we saw at Alabama, that's okay. As long as you have the mindset, and that's really, to me, the where I'm at, the big unknown with Steve Angeli. He didn't have a great offensive line in high school. We haven't seen him go through a lot of games. He only played 6 games as a junior because of COVID. We haven't seen him really be able to show, does he have the ability to process information at a high level? And that right there is going to be the thing that determines whether he's just a guy or whether he ends up being a lot better than I think he is. Now, you can see from his recruiting rankings that ESPN jumped him all the way up to number 129 overall, the number 6 quarterback in the country. Rivals has him as the number 13 pro style. And then, of course, 247 Sports has him as the number 20 pro style quarterback in the country. So there's a big gap. I tend to be closer to where 247 is on him. But he's got enough of an arm that if he can show me the ability to really process information quickly, like a Mack Jones, who, if you look at Steve Angeli's ranking, he's number 230 overall. That's not a really impressive ranking. That's higher than what Joe Burrow and Mack Jones were coming out of high school. Joe Burrow was number 288 on the composite list, and Mack Jones was number 399 on the composite list. But what those guys had is Joe Burrow's arm strength grew the longer he was in college. But really what separated him and what made him such a big-time prospect was what he had up here and his ability to process information and pick up a system that was really not an easy system to pick up, not an easy system to master, but he mastered it really quickly when they brought on Joe Brady. We saw the same thing with Mack Jones. Mack Jones' anticipation, ability to process information was elite, which allowed him to be an elite quarterback despite not having elite physical tools. It's not overly athletic, doesn't have a great arm. I would argue that Steve Angeli's arm coming out of high school is every bit as good as Mack Jones, if not better. And I've gone back and watched Mack Jones' film, and I remember when Alabama signed him, I watched his film, and I was not blown away. I was not impressed. But as he developed, it got a little better. But more importantly, he was able to process information, throw guys open, and just make great decisions and timing and anticipation. And so those are things that, to me, are parts of evaluating a quarterback that can be difficult to evaluate for younger players, especially high school players. So that's what I'm going to be watching when I see Steve Angeli this year. Is I'm going to be seeing if he can show me high level skills in that regard, which he really didn't. He really didn't have a chance to show it as a junior, to be completely honest with you. And it was his first year really playing varsity football. So I have cautious optimism about Steve Angeli being a guy capable of making a big jump as he gets into his junior season. And it's going to be important that he does so, because Notre Dame needs to continue adding top quarterbacks to their roster that can compete and battle when you look at the future of the position. All right, let's go number 3. Now, this is where I start to really like this class. I think Notre Dame is off to a very good start when it comes to the offensive line recruiting. And my number 3 guy is Tai Chan. Now, I have Tai Chan a little bit lower than others because of my 2-grade system. And he is a perfect example of why I created a 2-tier system, because there is a big difference with Tai Chan based on what he is now, what we've seen on film now, and what he could be. And keep in mind, what we've seen on film now is nothing but sophomore film. That's it. His state canceled football. I don't believe they played a spring football season. So with Tai, you're going off just potential and sophomore film. Now, what we see from him right now is a player that's very raw technically, a player that's 260 pounds maybe. He's got to fill out a lot. But what you also see on film, and this is why he has the high upside grade that you see there, is he is a guy that has the tools that you look for to be a top tackle. Very good length, 6'5", 6'6", well above average arm length. He's athletic, and sometimes his athleticism can be hidden on offense by his technique or lack thereof. And I think that's the thing that's holding him down right now, is that lack of great footwork and technique that you see, because he's a sophomore when we see him on film. But you can really see his athleticism on defense. You see a really nice burst. You see decent change of direction. You see good lateral quickness, all the things that you say, hey, if this kid can keep growing and developing and adding to his frame, he could end up being a really good player. So to me, Tai Chan may not blow you away with what you see on film now. And as you see from his recruiting ranking over here, he's in the 200s. Everybody has him between 209 and 236 overall. Anywhere from 22 to 30 as one of the top tackles in the country. Composite, number 209, and the number 22 offensive tackle. So, that's not going to blow you away. That's good, but it's not going to blow you away, and it's not going to be, hey, that's the next, first-round draft pick in Notre Dame. But to me, the thing that excites me about Tai Chan is that upside, that ceiling. And I'm really curious to see how he's going to develop as a senior. I think he might need a little bit more time in college than I would have originally anticipated, because he lost his junior season. He's a guy that's going to need that time, but I really like what I see from Tai Chan on film. And there's a lot of talent there. There's a lot to work with. The number 2 prospect on my board is Jadarian Price, the running back from Texas. And I have him ranked a little higher than the services. These next 2 guys are guys that I'm higher on than the national rankings. Not super higher on, but I definitely graded them out higher. Jadarian Price is 1. He is number 213 overall, you see on ESPN, and he's anywhere from there to 230. He's number 220 overall. Rivals has him as number 5 all-purpose back. He's around 20 for overall running backs, and then you can see he's 21 and 22 there. Now, that is actually pretty good when you consider how deep of a running back class this is nationally. I have him a little higher. There's some running backs I've seen ranked ahead of him that I do not like more than Jadarian Price. I really like Jadarian Price. And I really like him, especially for fitting into the Notre Dame system. I think he fits in very well to what Notre Dame does. He's a guy that to me to be a very strong zone runner, inside and outside zone, very patient runner, a guy that has that one cut and go ability that you really like. And he's experienced, as you can see here. If you can see the breakdown that I have down, and through his first 3 years of high school playing in Texas, he has over 3,000 rushing yards and 30 touchdowns. So he's a very talented back, very natural running back. And what that means is this: a natural running back to me is not just someone who has, good foot quickness and change of direction and good second gear. And he has all those things. I think he graded out pretty well for me athletically with the footwork, the lateral quickness, the change of direction, his ability to line up outside in the slot and run routes and make plays in the pass game. I really like. But a natural running back for me is a guy that has that next level skill. So not just someone who can make the first read. So you can teach any running back, hey, here's your run track, okay? You're going to attack the inside hip of the tackle, and if that defensive end goes outside, you cut inside. If he comes inside, you bounce outside. I mean, you can teach anybody that. But when you're playing the best teams in the country, that's only going to get you so far. That may get you a 2-3 yard gain. You need to be able to read that second level. You need to be able to have that second level anticipation, second level being like the linebacker level, to where I'm on my track and I'm making that initial read, but I see that this linebacker's flowing hard or underflowing, and I know that what my second move is going to be like. To me, that's what the great running backs do, is those guys have that second level anticipation that separates the good backs from the great backs, and it separates the guys that were super productive in college from being super productive in the NFL. A guy like Trent Richardson, for example, from Alabama. He was big, physical, and explosive. And he had a great offensive line. So he was very good in college. But a big part of the reason for me that I didn't view him as a 5-star running back coming out of high school, and the reason I didn't view him as a guy that was going to be successful in the NFL, is he didn't show me those great instincts for the position. He was just better physically than everybody else around him. And so to me, the great running backs have that. And I think Jadarian shows me that on film. And that's why I tend to be higher on him is, he's got to fill out his frame. He's got to build up. He's got a nice build now. He's a strong runner. He's not going to make a ton of people miss, but he does understand how to set up blocks, and he can make people miss. It's just not something he's going to grade out super high on. But the footwork, the speed, the vision, the anticipation, Jadarian Price graded out very well. And that's why I say even if Notre Dame doesn't get another back in this class, they're going to get a good grade from me because you got 2 good backs last year, and you got a third back in this class in or a third back in 2 years in Jadarian Price, and a guy that I view as a top 100 back. I mean, he's graded out very similarly to me coming out of high school as Dexter Williams did. And Dexter Williams is another guy that I was never blown away with elite physical tools, and something that we debated throughout his tenure is, he's so fast and explosive. I'm like, no, he's not really fast. He's explosive, but he's not fast. And he showed that at the combine and when he ran a 4.58 at Notre Dame's pro day. And so that's kind of how I see Jadarian Price, although I do like his second gear, and he's got a very similar second gear to Dexter, which is why Dexter was a home run back. But Dexter had very good vision and anticipation. He was a very natural running back. And I think Jadarian Price is very much that type of player. So number 1 on my board is Joey Tanona. I view him as a top 150 caliber player. He just missed a top 100 grade for me. And again, how my grades work is I have a grading system that kind of gives me a range. And on average, this player tends to be a top 100 player. Now, some years that guy could rank 75th. Some years that guy could rank 110th. It just depends on the depth of that particular class. But Joey Tanona was very close to being a top 100 player. And if he makes the kind of jump as a senior that he did from sophomore to junior season, he'll be a top 100 player for me. Now, here's the interesting thing about Joey Tanona. He was a left tackle in high school as a sophomore, and I liked him at tackle. I thought he could be a right tackle at the next level. I thought he's had shown me good agility on the edge, not great, but he could hook on high school blockers or defenders on the edge. He showed me good power, really good punch, average to above average arm length, which was one of my concerns about him. But he's big, thick body, good agility, good getting up to the second level, good in pass pro, understands angles, all those types of things. So I thought he was a good right tackle. To me, when they first got him, Joey Tanona graded out as a top 250 caliber player, which is a good player. And especially when it's an in-state offensive lineman. You always go, if there's a top 200 to 250 ranked in-state offensive lineman, you go get him. Then as a junior, he moved to center. And it was seamless. And when I watched him playing inside, his ranking skyrocketed for me because the athleticism that he showed as a good right tackle flourished inside. He was outstanding inside. His athleticism projects very well there. I loved his foot quickness. I loved his ability and he kept working his feet really effectively inside. And that's something he did as a junior. He doesn't stop his feet on contact very often. He understands working, if he initially hits a lineman and he squares him up or gets inside, but he knows he's got to work to that guy's outside, does a great job of continuing to work his feet to the outside to get that angle, plays with good angles. He looks so much more comfortable inside than I thought he was going to when he made that move. And his grade just really took off because he has the body, he has the athleticism to really project well inside. And that's not an insult. It's just some guys have better frames for the inside and better games for the inside. Quentin Nelson could definitely play out offensive tackle in the NFL, but he'd be a really good offensive tackle. I think he's a Hall of Fame guard because his skill set and his demeanor fits better inside. And when I see a guy like Joey Tanona, I see similar things, not comparing him to Quentin Nelson as a player, but that similar mindset, his body just fits really well inside. You can see ESPN has him ranked the number 141 overall player. That's probably, I'd have him a little higher than that, but that's close to my range. 247, and they have him as the number one center. 247 Sports ranks him as number 192. Rivals has him 201. The interesting thing about Joey Tanona, and this is actually one of the things I like about him, and this is a reason he graded out higher for me because of that intangible grade. The three different recruiting services that have done rankings so far, SI99 has not, SL American, we have not released any rankings. He's listed by the three different services at three different positions. 247 ranks him as a tackle, Rivals ranks him as a guard, and ESPN ranks him as a center. That's one of the things I love about him because I do think he could play all three of those positions at the next level. And again, I think he could play them all at a relatively high level. He's a top 250 type of tackle. He's a borderline top 100 player as a center guard, and that's why Joey Tanona takes the number one ranking so far on my board. Now, keep in mind, you're going to want to – the reason I showed you how to get to this, and we'll do it again. Okay, let's do it again. So if you're on the page, you go to the top left, click on those three bars, go to Notre Dame ND Recruiting, and you'll see so the scholarship offers are updated. That is here. The visit schedule will continue to update as players commit. We'll add them there. You'll see the big board that constantly is updated when players are added. And then, of course, here we are with the offensive big board. So that is where we are with recruiting, and that's where you can find all of our stuff. Definitely want to check that out on a consistent basis. Here's my current ranking, and then as we kind of get down through these, as they start adding more classes, when we get down here, explains what those different grades are as far as the upside. It helps, I think, with the upside grade, help understand what I think a guy could be if he maxes out his potential. As Notre Dame gets more players, they will be ranked. They will be graded, ranked, and thrown into this ranking, and it will be adjusted accordingly. So as guys commit, within usually 24 to 48 hours, I'll have all of these articles updated. I'm going to work on making sure they're all done in the first 24 hours, but that's not always possible. But here we have, as you can see, we have the 5 Notre Dame commits. So where does this class stack up right now? To me, right now, this is not a top 10 offensive class yet. I think, as I said before, good foundation with the offensive line, good foundation at running back, good solid quarterback in a year that's not loaded at quarterback. and you've got a low floor, higher ceiling wide receiver. So that's a good place to be. The key now for Notre Dame is what is next. And that is where we're going to find really what is going to define how good this class can be. Is what does Notre Dame do next? Are they going to be able to go out and add elite players to this class? Are they going to be able to add higher ceiling players to this class? And also, can they add some higher floor players to this class? That is also going to be important. So when you look at the class, I think the priorities for me, it begins at wide receiver. I think for me, Notre Dame is and actually it's good timing, Connor. What is the top need for the 22 offense right now? To me, it's wide receiver. I think that there are, as we talked about in a recent podcast, there are some players on the board that could be difference makers, but Notre Dame's got to finish with them. Xavion Bradshaw, Tobias Merriweather, CJ Williams, for me, are the top 3 on my board so far. Those are guys to me that if Notre Dame can get those guys and land Bradshaw plus one of those 2 prospects, to me, Connor, that is a very, very strong receiver class. And then now I feel even better about it in Maureen Walker, because when you look at what you got last year with Styles and Colsey and Jaden Thomas doesn't have the ceiling of other players, but he's got a higher floor. And then you look at the year before with Jordan Johnson, Xavier Watts, Jay Brunell. You can take a chance on a Maureen Walker if your the rest of the prospects in your class are good enough. And to me, when I look at a class that would contain Xavion Bradshaw and either CJ Williams or Tobias Merriweather, or even if we're being honest, those 2 outside guys, I would say I would ding the class a little bit because there's no slots, there's no after the catch guys in the class. That would ding the grade a little bit. But you'd still have 2 very good outside receivers, and that would be something that to me would make this a good receiver class. If they can get Bradshaw and one of the outside guys, or if something happens and they lose a current receiver from the roster to either injury or somebody transfers, then you could maybe say add a 4th, and then you get Merriweather and Williams and Bradshaw. That would make it an elite receiver class, in my opinion, based on how I grew those players. So I think that is priority number 1. I think priority number 2 is finishing off this offensive line class at a high level. And that's going to be interesting, because Notre Dame's offensive line recruiting the last 2 years has been a little shaky in some areas and strong in others. I think that where it's been strong is Notre Dame has signed 3 legitimate top 100 recruits, and 1 guy in Blake Fisher that was a borderline 5-star player with a 5-star ceiling. And when you look at Tosh Baker, I had him as a top 50 player coming out of high school as well. He was a guy that, to me, had elite tools, but he was a guy that would need a little bit more time than a Blake Fisher, because Blake Fisher showed up at Notre Dame 330. Tosh Baker showed up at Notre Dame like 275, 280. So there's definitely a bigger need there in regards to what type of time that he would need to fill out that frame. And so, but I love Tosh's raw talent. He's already competing for a starting job. Rocco Spindler is another player for me that graded out as a top 100 recruit and a guy with a 5-star upside. Then you have a guy like Joe Alt in the 2021 class who is going to need some time to develop and fill out, but I like his upside. Michael Carmody, to me, was a top 200 caliber player. Caleb Johnson is a solid prospect. So there's been some good, really good players added, but to me, the depth has been concerning. And we've seen that Jeff Quinn can go out and get those top players, Rocco, Blake Fisher, Tosh Baker. But filling out with the strength of the 3, 4, and 5 has not been as good. And obviously Notre Dame came up way short in 2021 or 2020, missed out on Peter Skoronsky, missed out on Jimmy Christ, missed out, decided not to recruit Zach Zinter, who's off to a great start right now at Michigan. Played Peter Skoronsky, who was a freshman All-American at Northwestern, would be starting right now for Notre Dame. So there have been some mistakes, not going after Wyatt Millham harder in the 21 class. That means this 22 class has to be a home run class. Now, the problem that Notre Dame is in right now is there's no elite players that I view as legitimate targets for Notre Dame. Now, we could talk about Zach Rice, and Notre Dame is going to go after him. He is talking about making a visit to Notre Dame, and that's all great. They're going to have to strike it big with him when he comes on campus. They're going to need him to really get blown away because he's the only like top 50 caliber player for me on the board. Having said that, if you take the recruiting rankings aside and you just look at the talent of the players and the ceiling of the players, there is a class to be had that I'd be excited about that doesn't contain a Zach Rice or a highly ranked guy. Because as you all know, I care more about a guy's ceiling than I do about his current ranking as a junior in high school or a senior in high school. I care about what a guy can be. And this is a unique offensive line class. It's a very deep offensive line class nationally, and it's a very good year in the Midwest. Now, some of these Midwestern guys that are really highly ranked are interior players. And so that's where Notre Dame could really load up on highly ranked guys. There's two particular players in the state of Wisconsin who are borderline either top 100 recruits or borderline top 100 recruits that could be very, very important to this class. That is Carson Hensman and Billy Shrouth. Notre Dame has to finish with both, but Notre Dame is in great place with both players. I talked to Carson Hensman 2 weeks ago at the Columbus event. You could tell there's a legitimate, like he likes Notre Dame a lot, but he also likes Wisconsin and Iowa a lot. So Notre Dame is going to have to really close there. This is a recruitment that if Jeff Quinn can go into the state of Wisconsin, take a top 100 recruit from that state that the Badgers really, really want, that would be a huge recruiting win. If he could then do it for two players, Billy Shrouth being the other, which again is not going to be easy, then that to me is, and you add that with Tai Chan and Joey Tanona, that's the makings of a top 5 offensive line class. And so those two guys are very, very, very important to me. Now, here's the key, though. We've already talked about Joey Tanona projects more as an interior player. Could play right tackle, but his ceiling is highest inside. Carson Hensman is a guard center. He's an pure interior player. He plays inside in high school. He plays guard in high school. Billy Shrouth plays tackle in high school. I think Billy could play tackle, but he's more of like a Joey Tanona type. Could play right tackle, but he projects best at guard. So that puts Notre Dame in an interesting situation. You've got Tai Chan who can be a tackle, but he's a low floor, high ceiling guy. Then you have a guy like Jake Taylor. Now, he's another guy that's coming to Notre Dame. I believe, I'd have to look it up, but I believe it's the 18th to the 20th, I think is the weekend he's coming. I could be wrong on that. I'm going to look that up actually as we're talking on the visit list at Irish Breakdown that I just it's on that recruiting page I just showed you. But Jake Taylor is scheduled to visit Notre Dame, which is very, very important. He is a guy that, he is coming, see here. I don't have it yet. But he's supposed to be coming. Oh, yes, here we go. June 11th to 13th is when Jake Taylor is coming to Notre Dame. So he does have a visit on schedule now. That's one they have to hit out of the park. He, to me, him or George Fitzpatrick, to me, could be the keys to whether or not this could be a top 5 offensive line class. And neither of them are super highly ranked. They're both 200 to 250 or not even ranked guys, like top 250 ranked guys. But I love their ceilings. I love their athleticism. And they're guys that what I say, when you get this guy in the Matt Bayless strength program for 4 or 5 years, they can end up being elite players. So there's a class out there, in my opinion, that Notre Dame could get that is not going to have a lot of top 50 or maybe even not even top 100 guys in it. Maybe 1, maybe 2. That could be a big-time class because the ceilings are high. And that's going to be the key. But it has to include 1 or 2 of those Wisconsin kids, and I like Shrouth and Hensman better than Joe Bruner. Joe Bruner is another highly ranked top 100 caliber player, but to me, of those 3 Wisconsin kids, he's probably 3rd in that group. But I love Hensman and I love Shrouth. And then you got to get Jake Taylor or George Fitzpatrick. I think Taylor, for me, is the guy I like best because I have more confidence in his ability to add weight and get to 300-plus pounds and keep his athleticism, keep his mobility, and be able to play tackle. So that to me is next. Then you have to tight end. Tight end could be one right now that there's nobody in the tight end class now that Jack Nickel decommitted. But I would not be shocked if by the time we get to the end of the summer, if Notre Dame has 2 tight ends in the class. We've talked a lot about this, Holden Stace and Eli Raritan. They've got to get both. I feel very good about where they are with Stace. They're still in a battle with Iowa for Raritan, but I like where Notre Dame has positioned themselves. He was on campus this past weekend. Hung out with some other players in the class, hung out with, had a chance to see the campus and do a lot of different things. And from what I talking to a couple sources, it went really well. So they're going to have to finish and close on him. He also has a June visit scheduled. So they're going to have to really close. This has a chance to be an outstanding tight end class. Now, running back is an interesting one. I would say if in the order of need, I'd probably put running back last in regards to, because they already have Jadarian Price. But if you really want to take that next big leap, I think a second running back in this class is key, but it's got to be a big-time running back, in my opinion. And to me, that means one of the big three, and that is Dallin Hayden, Nicholas Singleton, and Gavin Sawchuk. Now, that also happens to be my ranking of those three backs. As you saw on that earlier list, I do have a big board that I've done of the offensive or of the running backs, and I'm going to show that to you now. All right. Here, let's pull that up here real quick and we'll go through it. So said it's up here in the recruiting tab, ND recruiting, and running back big board. So as you'll see from this big board, Dallin Hayden is my number one back. Nicholas Singleton's my number two back, and Gavin Sawchuk's my number three. And then you see Jadarian Price fitting in right there at 4. If you can get one of those three guys above him, that is an outstanding class. All three of those guys, well, the first two guys, Dallin Hayden and Nicholas Singleton, both grade out as top 100 recruits for me, as you can see from this board. And then Gavin Sawchuk, to me, is a top 150 caliber player. He's a consensus top 100 recruit by others. I'm not quite as high on him as others, but he's still very good. He's still a very good back. I just don't see the elite tools that some other people see. Now, then there's Quinshawn Junkins, who down here, David Knight asked us about. What are your thoughts on Quinshawn Jenkins? It's actually Judkins. David, I would encourage you to read this article. It's at irishbreakdown.com, and I share my thoughts on Quinshawn. I like him a lot. I've compared him to, he's a faster version of Tony Jones Jr. Tony Jones Jr. is a pretty good back at Notre Dame. But for me, he's a guy that, to me, I think Notre Dame have to do better than him, in my opinion, with Jadarian Price. Now, if they got him and Price, would I be happy with that? Yeah, I'd be happy with that. That's two really good running backs. But if you just took two backs last year and you look at the fact that to take two this year, I need to see somebody with a higher floor and a higher ceiling, in my opinion. Now, Junkins has a higher floor, but I don't see the same level of the high ceiling. Now, I do like him better than players like Emeka Megwa, Damari Alston, guys like that. But I think if Notre Dame's going to add a second back to this class, it needs to be one of those top three guys. Now, Singleton, it's Notre Dame, Penn State, and Ohio State. Hayden, it's more of a Notre Dame, Ohio State battle. I like where Notre Dame is with Hayden. Now, am I making a prediction that he's going to come to Notre Dame? No, but I do think Notre Dame is in a better place with him than a lot of other people think. I don't think he's the lock to Ohio State that some people tend to think that he is. I think Notre Dame has put themselves in a good position, and if they can blow out the visit, and he's going to be on campus June 11th to June 13th, if they can knock that out of the park, then I really like Notre Dame's chances there. I think he's the kind of kid that fits Notre Dame really, really well. He's the kind of kid, to me, that when he gets on campus, he's going to say, it works for me here. He's got the talent, obviously, that you want, but more so, he's the kind of kid who's got the personality. He's got the interest in regards to the academic aspect of things that fits really well with what Notre Dame is about. He's one of those top 100 caliber prospects that, to me, gets Notre Dame and would thrive at Notre Dame, and is the kind of guy that if you can get him on campus, and especially if you can really knock that visit out of the park, you've got a chance to have you've got a chance to pull off the upset. So that is my thoughts on the running back board. So that's it for the just talk of the board. I think if you could say what would the dream situation be for Notre Dame in regards to that list, if Notre Dame can finish off with Xavion Bradshaw and either Tobias Merriweather or CJ Williams, if they can add the two tight ends we talked about, if they can add two of the three with Wisconsin linemen, and then a Jake Taylor or a George Fitzpatrick, preferably Jake Taylor first, Fitzpatrick second, and then if you can add Dallin Hayden or Nicholas Singleton at running back, that to me is an outstanding offensive class. That to me is now a third straight year in a row where you've really loaded up on offensive players. You could say, okay, they should have done better here. They could have done better there. And we'll have those criticisms and we'll have those critiques. But if you just look at the class for what it is, and then you look at how it complements the year before, I think that would be a great class. So I really like where this class could be. Now, here's the concern. I don't necessarily love where Notre Dame is in recruiting all of those players. There's an opportunity for them to finish strong, but this group is going to have to really finish strong. Tommy Rees is going to have to get that group going. Brian Kelly's going to have a little heart-to-heart with some of the coaches on offense and make sure that they understand what's expected of them between now and December. And, of course, Coach Kelly needs to play his role as well. So I think that's kind of where I think they need to be. So that is my thoughts on offensive recruiting right now. Let's see if there are some other questions. All right. So Michael Scheller, good afternoon, Brian. This was before the show started, so he did not know Vince was not going to be with us. Where's Notre Dame with 22 running back and O-line recruiting? Start with there, Michael. As we talked a little bit earlier, I like where Notre Dame is with 2 of the 3 off. I actually think Notre Dame's in a decent place with all 3 of the Wisconsin offensive linemen. They're all going to be visiting, I believe, the weekend of June 18th and 20th, which is right now Notre Dame's biggest weekend from a number standpoint. I think Notre Dame is in a good place with all 3 of those guys. I especially like where they are with Hensman and Shrouth. I would, if I had to make a prediction, I would say that Notre Dame is first with both of those players. But I don't think it's a lock. And for Hensman especially, the visits are going to be very important. He's going to be going to Notre Dame. He's going to go to, from what he told me, I believe he's going to be going to Iowa and Wisconsin before he visits Notre Dame. And then potentially he's going to go visit, and then he's going to visit Bama after Notre Dame and could potentially visit Penn State. That is the last I saw from him. So they're going to have to knock that one out of the park. Jake Taylor, I think they trail Oklahoma, but they're in striking distance if they can knock it out of the park with the visit. Fitzpatrick, I believe, visited recently unofficially, which meant he did the self-guided tour thing, saw campus and all those types of things. And then running back recruiting, I broke that one down. I like where they are with Dallin Hayden, but they got to close. I think they're in good position with Nick Singleton, but I don't think they're in the top group, that number 1 spot, which I think they were maybe 5-6 months ago. I think Ohio State and Penn State are also in a great position there. So I'd say they're either second or third for Singleton. And I don't see Sawchuk coming to Notre Dame. I think Oklahoma and some other programs are higher on his list, but they're still working. And I like that they're still working. Any rumblings of uncommitted prospects that Notre Dame may be trending upward with recently? I think offensively, I like where they're at with the 2 tight ends. I think they're putting in good work with C.J. Williams. I like where they stand with C.J. Williams ahead of his visit. And I think they're in the top 3 for Tobias Merriweather. Again, it's not him saying that. This is my opinion. But we've had people talk to him and just talking to people that are familiar with that recruitment. I think Notre Dame's in the top 3 there. Work to be done, but I like where they are. Xavion Bradshaw is, to me, the wild card. He's not really got into the recruiting process yet. He's not really someone that likes to talk to the media. He's not really someone who seems to care much about recruiting rankings and all those types of things. So it's hard to get a read on where they are with him. He talked to Eric Rudder. Sounds like he likes Coach Alexander. They talk a lot. We talked about how people in his family grew up as Notre Dame fans. So everything sounds good, but he's still got to schedule the visit officially and get up here before I'm going to feel super confident. If they can get him on campus before he commits to North Carolina or somebody else, then I'll feel good about where things stand there. Okay, Connor Patton, this is and I'll take defensive questions right now if you guys have them. I'm not going to ignore your questions as we wrap this up, as long as they're recruiting related. And we will talk about the defensive board probably tomorrow. Tomorrow or Wednesday, we'll do that. But Deshaun McCullough flipped from Ohio State to Indiana, presumably to be closer to home. Any chance he could be convinced to flip to a Northern Indiana team? That's not happening. So it wasn't necessarily being closer to home that caused him to flip to Indiana. The drive from where he lives to Columbus, Ohio is not very far. He flipped to Indiana because his dad coaches there, and he wanted the opportunity to play for his dad or play, at the school that his dad's at, and then also to play with his younger brother who's in the 23 class, Dea, who also committed to Indiana. So that's what that one was about. It really wasn't about and I see somebody else down here answered that. It really is not about that. And so James Taylor has Cyrus Moss scheduled a visit. Yes, he has. I believe he's coming the weekend of the 18th to the 20th. Okay. Here we go. Maddie K, 55. Do you think that this year, talking about the 2022 class, maybe Notre Dame could recruit all the way through signing day instead of doing all their work before early signing? Maddie, it depends on who they get. I mean, look, if they were to get Hayden and Williams and Bradshaw and the 2 tight ends and 2 of the Wisconsin kids and Jake Taylor before signing day, then call it a day. I mean, because you don't have really room to add more to that. Now, what I would like to see them do is maybe stay engaged with certain players. That way, if they get through the season and some players leave, maybe some guys go early to the NFL or some players transfer, that they haven't just ignored kids for 6 months. But I would love to see them can maintain relationships with, let's say you don't get Tobias Merriweather early on. Let's say he goes to Oregon. Okay. Let's say that Jake Taylor goes to Oklahoma. Let's say that Dallin Hayden commits to Ohio State. You stay on those guys, right? You stay on those guys and you try to flip them. But let's say that those guys don't commit anywhere. Let's say that you fill up at receiver, you get CJ Williams, you get Xavier Bradshaw. Keep talking to Tobias Merriweather. Maybe somebody flips down the road. Maybe Joe Moorhead leaves for head coaching job and you can get back in that conversation. The mistake that Notre Dame made a couple years ago when Jimmy Chris committed to Virginia is they just stopped talking to him, completely stopped talking to him. Penn State did not stop talking to him. So then when things went south at Virginia and his brother was unhappy and then he decommitted from Virginia, Penn State had kept a relationship with him and they were able to flip him. Notre Dame had not kept a relationship with him and they couldn't. They didn't have a chance, even though Notre Dame was the number 2 school and a lot of people thought Notre Dame was going to get him when he originally committed to Virginia. So I would like for them to stay on that one. So, okay, KMA Preston. What are the chances we get a commitment in the month of May? Well, I think that there's going to get more. Public commitments. I think that there's a chance they could still get some guys in April. Publicly now, privately silent commits. Obviously, those are a little different deal. But I think they could get a couple public commits here in the next couple weeks. I think they'll definitely get at least 2 or 3 commitments in May. I think that they're in a really good position with a lot of players that could be in decision-making mode. Now, here's the interesting thing. There are some prospects, in my opinion, that either have or will commit to Notre Dame, but won't go public until they take their official visit. This is a weird situation that's new for all of us in that most of these kids have not visited Notre Dame so far. A lot of these kids, in fact, haven't visited Notre Dame. Some that have gone on the self-guided tour, which is a different deal. So there are prospects that I believe will or could commit to Notre Dame silently, but don't want to go public until they visit officially because they want to make sure. There are some kids who don't like the whole decommitment game. And there are some kids who have decommitted previously from other schools that don't want to go through that again. They want to make sure that Notre Dame is the right place. And so this year is a little bit trickier for me because Notre Dame has usually in the past been pretty anti-silent commitment, but I think there's a little bit more understanding of why some of these prospects are wanting to be silent commits instead of public commits because they haven't been able to visit campus. So I think as these kids visit, then you could see things move kind of quickly with them. KMA Preston, does Notre Dame have a chance with Zach Rice, or should I move on already? No, don't move on. I mean, because he is talking about making a visit. I don't believe he has a visit scheduled yet, but he's talked about visiting Notre Dame. And if he does, in fact, visit Notre Dame, then I think that they'll have a chance. It's just I think right now they're way behind some other schools because he hasn't been to Notre Dame. If they can get him on campus and he commits to a visit, then I think they'll have a shot. But right now, he's not as a guy that I see as someone that I would predict is going to be in this class. Hopefully that changes. Hopefully they can get him to commit to a visit because he's an outstanding prospect. There's no doubt about that. I grade him out as a top 50 player. He is that elite caliber player that Notre Dame isn't really in on as far as floor and ceiling, and that's the difference. Okay. Is it possible to see a 2023 prospect commit soon and be the face leader of that class? Any hunches? I think we're probably still a month or two away from that. I would think, especially publicly. I think that Notre Dame I think they'll get at least 1 or 2 2023 kids in the summer, just like they did last year. But I don't think they're necessarily pushing for any 2023 kids right now because you start filling up a little too early in 2023 kids. It can make recruiting certain 2022 positions a little bit more challenging. And I think they want to get some 22 kids in the fold first before they start moving on to 2023 kids. So that is it. That is it for the questions. That's going to be it for today's show. I appreciate everybody being with me today. We'll be back again tomorrow. Vince will be back with me. We're going to talk this week. We're going to go over the defensive board. We are going to talk about Tommy Rees's recent comments about the offense, give our thoughts on that. We'll play his comments. give our thoughts on that, what those things mean, good, bad, ugly, all those types of things from that. We'll have an NFL draft preview. And then I have a question that I want to ask everybody. I've had a couple people reach out to me and talk about possibly doing some sort of live stream during the NFL draft. I hadn't really thought about that, but if people are interested in that, hit me up either on Twitter, on our Facebook group page, the Irish Breakdown Facebook group page, or not the page, but the group, or leave a comment to this video when it's on YouTube, so I can kind of get a feel for what people are thinking. I don't mind doing one. I wasn't planning on doing one, but if you all want it, then I'll consider doing one. Vince and I'll consider doing one. So let me know if you think that's something you're interested in. Otherwise, we'll probably come on after guys get picked and kind of talk about what it means. And then, of course, Saturday is the blue gold game, and we'll have a live stream after the blue gold game and talk about Notre Dame and where things are. So that's everything going on right now with Notre Dame and what our plans are for this week. I'll have a lot of draft stuff coming up on irishbreakdown.com. So make sure you check all that out. We'll have recruiting stuff coming out this week as well. I would not be, maybe there might be some big news this week. So we'll see how things progress. We'll see how things shape up. So make sure you stay locked into irishbreakdown.com, our podcast, and we'll talk to all of you all again very soon.